5 states on the East Coast voted tonight, and on the Republican side, a clean sweep for Donald Trump. While on the Democrat side of the ledger, Hillary Clinton goes 4 for 5 in those 5 states tonight. Let's continue our conversation with a couple of intriguing guests via Skype from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Roger Stone, noted political consultant and a former political advisor to Donald Trump, and from Newsmax, New York, former NYPD Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, and via telephone at 1-877-Newsmax, we are pleased to welcome Mike. Mike, I understand you want to talk about the Veep stakes out there in Littleton, Colorado tonight.
Hey, JD, I would like to suggest for Trump's VP running mate a conservative serving senator woman. There are only 4: Collins, Ernst, Fisher, and Moore Capito. My emotional favorite is Ernst because she is also a military veteran like me. And in addition, I think she'd be a great VP. Maybe you could make some calls, pull some strings, use your personal charm. What do you think, JD?
Well, Mike, I think that you have offered an interesting choice in Joni Ernst, who in the midterms caught everybody's attention being a pig farmer, saying she would combat pork. But let me turn to some skilled professionals on this question and go first to Roger Stone. You hear Mike. He's already made the call, saying Joni Ernst should get the number 2 spot on the ticket. Your thoughts about Senator Ernst?
Well, I like the senator very much. I think the American people are open to someone like her. I certainly like the idea of a woman president and vice president, just not Hillary Clinton. Beyond that, I don't really have a view. I think Donald Trump's going to be nominated on the first ballot. I don't think he has a person in mind today. Frankly, I hope he puts Ron Paul over at the Treasury Department, unless, of course, he offers him the chairmanship of the Fed. But there are a lot of reforms and good people I think Donald Trump could bring to government. But as far as the vice president, I think it's a wide open equation. I don't think he has a person in mind, but he will want somebody of exceptional ability. But somebody who is going to follow the number 1 man, and that's Donald Trump.
And I don't want to let Mike leave us without thanking him, as he made mention of his service in the military. Mike, we thank you for your service, and we note the service of Joni Ernst. And we turn to someone on his resume who was the interim interior minister in Iraq during our involvement there. And Bernie Kerik, in terms of a constituency that has found a voice with the Republican frontrunner, it would have to be the veterans community. I'm hearing from so many veterans that they believe Donald Trump is so goal-oriented that the so-called Veterans Affairs reform and VA healthcare reform we were supposed to see with landmark legislation will actually get done if Donald Trump becomes the president. Do you sense that among your fellow veterans, Bernie?
I hear it every single day. I hear it not only from the veterans, I hear it from the law enforcement community, the public servants around the country. He has an enormous following, and I think, you know, we've been dealing with this veterans issue for the last 10, 15 years, where the U.S. government just doesn't support the men and women that goes and puts their lives on the line on a daily basis for the people of this country. I am absolutely convinced that if Donald Trump becomes the president, that's going to get done. They will be taken care of. Absolutely.
Well, let us go back to the telephones at 1-877-Newsmax and take a call from my old congressional district and my town out there, Scottsdale, Arizona. Alan is on the phone. Alan, welcome to Newsmax TV.
Hi, JD. You're my buddy forever, I'll tell you.
Well, bless you, Alan.
Remember what Joe Pyle has always taught us. There's only 3 ways to help a criminal. You remember that?
Well, I am mindful of many things that Sheriff Joe has had to say, and he remains popular out there in Maricopa County. What's on your mind tonight, Alan?
Well, it was a joke I was going to tell you, but I think, first of all, the governor of Florida would be my first pick as far as vice president. I got a lot of respect for him, and so from that standpoint. The other thing is that, I think Donald Trump with making America great again is one step away from actually having probably the best argument he possibly could make, and that is how to lower the cost of living for every American. And that trumps everything you possibly could say about the minimum wage. And that's through energy, to lower the cost for all the things that we pay for through fuel, and have a revolution to, absolutely positively stop buying oil from anybody else but ourselves, and from our own resources. So got a lot of respect for you, JD.
Well, I've got a lot of respect for you, Alan. Thanks for calling, and say hey to all the home folks. And let's get some thoughts on what you had to say tonight, Alan. Let me turn first to Roger Stone, especially since you're ensconced in South Florida tonight, Roger. I have to admit to you, I had a chance to interview Governor Rick Scott of Florida, and it kind of came to me like an epiphany. That article he had in USA Today talking about being an outsider like Trump in business, being successful in running for public office. Florida is a key state, some would argue perhaps even more pivotal than Ohio. Do you think Governor Scott might get a look-see for the number 2 spot on the ticket?
Well, I'd have to see some polling that indicated that the governor, who's still very polarizing when won a narrow election, but was reelected nonetheless, actually enhances your chances of carrying Florida. I mean, JD, I think that this is a question of looking for somebody with the experience to implement the Trump program. Trump has already indicated he'd like somebody from government, meaning somebody with public service experience, who knows, how to do an oil change. He needs somebody like that to carry out his agenda, and I think there's a number of options. Obviously, there's a political question here. If he is just short of 1,237 votes, right after the end of the primary season, there's more than a month to the convention, a month to work those 54 uncommitteds from Pennsylvania, the other uncommitteds that are out there from the National Committee. And then, of course, Senator Rubio has 100-plus votes that are going to be available at some point. If we get beyond the first ballot, or perhaps on the first ballot. So I'm confident that Trump will have the number. It doesn't mean he wins the number outright, although he could by the end of the primary season.
Let me turn to something else that Alan mentioned, Bernie Kerik. And Alan was making a case out there in my old congressional district about energy self-sufficiency and the economy. Just interested in your thoughts as the former interim interior minister in Iraq. Donald Trump has continued to say, we made a mistake by not getting all that oil to pay for the cost of the war. As the former interior minister, I know we can't go back in time, but does Trump have a point about that Iraqi oil?
Well, I think he has a bigger point. It's not just the Iraqi oil. I was listening to his victory speech this evening, and he talked about NATO. He talked about how the United States protects a number of different countries who really don't give back to the U.S. And I think, we've got to get something back from a lot of these countries. His idea with regard to the oil in Iraq, it may have been a good idea. It may have been something we should have been looking at, we should have been doing. Look, we made a number of mistakes in Iraq, in the war on terror over the last 15 years, but the war has to continue. This battle against radical Islam has to continue. We've got to fight them there, or we'll be fighting them much bigger and harder here. And I don't want that for my kids or my children's children. So I think Trump has a basic idea what has to be done. He winds up in office as president. I think he has to put the right people in place to get it done. And I'm convinced that his leadership ability and what he's done in this city, what I've known him to do.
And you've seen it.
You
bet. You've seen it firsthand.
Do it.
You bet. Hey, thanks very much, Bernie Kerik and Roger Stone. Our thanks also to Alan in Scottsdale. When we come back, more of your calls, so stay tuned.